You might be wondering how to shoot professional looking recipes like the famous BuzzFeed Tasty. And in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you the list of equipments, how to shoot it, what all stuff you need, and what to keep in mind. Talking from cameras to how to shoot the recipe, the lighting, and so much more. Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Hamid, if you all don't know, and in this video, like I said, I'm gonna be sharing how to shoot professional looking recipes just like BuzzFeed Tasty. As you may know, I have a YouTube channel and an Instagram page with over 1 million subscribers where I used to shoot similar recipes like BuzzFeed. The hype was going on, COVID hit, and I decided, why not? Let me shoot the same recipes at home. So I got to digging and I found a huge list of stuff that was required. So I'm gonna make this process super easy for you, and I think we're still in that craze of creating recipes at home. And why not shoot them professionally? And that's exactly why you should be watching all the way to the end, and I'm gonna be linking all the items that I'm gonna be listing here in this video down in the description below. So let's get to the first item. Obviously, most importantly, cameras. Two of the cameras that I use usually are Canon and Sony. Now, I know a lot of people are gonna be like, why are you not using the same family of cameras? It's just circumstances. I was a Canon fanboy and I switched to Sony. So in these videos, you have two shots usually. You have a top shot, which is like a flat lay, the most famous shot BuzzFeed was known for. So we're shooting from the top, and another shot that's from the side placed on a tripod. So this camera, which is the Sony a7 IV, is the one that's positioned on the side shot on the tripod. Next camera that I use, which is on the top, which is basically mounted this way, top down, is my Canon 90D. I've been using this thing for about 4 or 5 years, and it's been nothing but amazing. Next up is the tripod. This tripod is the one that the Sony a7 IV is mounted on. Now that we've covered our side shot, I'm going to be talking about what you need to shoot overlay or top down. Over here, we have what I call a boom arm, where as you can see, there is an arm right here in a 90-degree orientation. So the camera mounts over here, over a jobby or a ball head, as you might call it. I'm gonna put it up on the screen, and I'm gonna obviously, like I mentioned, link every single item down in the description, so there's no guessing game in here. Next, obviously, you're gonna need this sandbag, because if you don't and you put the camera at the other end, everything is gonna go downhill. The whole camera is gonna fall down and it's broken. So now that we've covered this end of things, next is lights. So now here we have our lighting setup. Usually what I like to do is just go with a single light setup, or I do one single light setup and a fill light. But in order to keep it super simple for you guys, let's just talk about one light setup. Over here, I have the Godox SL60W. This one is a 60-watt light plus an 80-centimeter diffuser, where that's gonna soften the light as much as possible. You don't wanna have harsh light going on your surface or your background, and especially since you're cooking, you need really good lighting, especially when you're shooting something that's white, like flour, rice, things like that. You do not want that to be overexposed. Now that we have a general overview of the equipment that you might need, let's dive into specific details as to why I've chosen the cameras and the lenses and the lighting setup that I've chosen. So the first equipment I want to talk in depth about, which is super important yet so small, is this jobby ball head. Now, it's super small as you can see, but the beauty of this thing is that I can mount it in any orientation that I want. So why that's so important is that I'm gonna be mounting this up here, and it's gonna allow me to mount my camera top down, recording the flat surface of this table. That's exactly how they do it in BuzzFeed. Now, of course, BuzzFeed being BuzzFeed, they wanted to be a little bit extra, so there's C-stands and everything, but this gets the job done. Next on the list is the Sony a7 IV that I mentioned earlier. This Sony a7 IV, I've paired it with my 24 to 17 millimeter lens from Sigma, which has a constant f-stop of 2.8. Now, why I love this lens so much is obviously number one, the price point is much lower than the G Master. Second, the quality is outstanding. And third is the fact that I can zoom in from 24 to 70 millimeters. And that's super important in videos like this, especially since this is going to be my side shot camera. The setting that I use on this is 4K 420 8-bit, and I shoot in S-Log for majority of my videos. Next is the top-down camera that I mentioned, which is a Canon 90D with a 10 to 18 millimeter Tamron lens. This also has a constant aperture of 2.8, and why I've chosen such a wide camera is because of the limitation of how high my boom arm can go relative to the table that I'm working on. Now, obviously, if your boom arm that you find can go much higher than this, I would probably work with a 24 to 70 on that as well, because these wide lenses have a tendency of having a sort of a bowing effect on the sides, right? So in order to get rid of that or have sharper focus, I would probably get 24 to 70 on both the cameras. Another issue that I have with this is that it's APS-C sensor, so whatever focal length you're working with is multiplied by 1.6. So I had to really go wide as possible to cover as much real estate as possible. And obviously the setting I use on this camera is also 4K 420 8-bit. I can't choose the setting on that, but I know that this camera does shoot in 4K 420 8-bit. The most important thing is to make sure your colors match between the Canon and the Sony camera. If you can, and you can afford to do so, I would recommend to stick to one family. Either it's Canon, Sony, Nikon, whatever it is, but make sure to choose one family and stick with it because of the color science that each camera has. All right, next up, we're gonna be talking about the tripod. Now, I used to use those really flimsy, plasticky tripods, but this one is something that I invested in. It's pretty much like 200 dirhams or about $50. The other ones were like $20. So the $30 gap was always like holding me off. But finally, after a few mishaps, I made sure to get a little bit of a sturdy camera to make sure it holds that load of the Sony a7 IV or the ZV-E one that I'm using over here. This one also has a ball head. So this ball head helps me shoot in horizontal or vertical whenever I need it. Now that I've talked about all the equipment you might need, obviously you're gonna need tables and you're gonna need backdrops. So the table that I use in these videos is a 60 by 120. So the depth of it is 60 centimeters and the width of it is 120 centimeters. Then the height of it is about, I would say like 80 centimeters or 90 centimeters so that I can comfortably stand and create the recipes. Of course, my wife also helped me a lot in these videos, so the height of this table was really good for her. Next up, I like to talk about backdrops on this table. Although this table that we're working with looks pretty decent, majority of our recipes are shot just without any backdrop. It's on the table itself, but once in a while, I like to change it up. So let's dive into those. So this big bad boy was a backdrop that we made by ourselves. Now, the way we did this is we went to what we call Ace, or you can go to any home improvement store that you have around you, and we custom made this by telling them to give us a 60 by 90 board. It was literally just a wooden board without any color. Then what we also did is we found a few colors that we liked in spray paint, and we brought those into the house. And actually not into the house. We made sure we do it in the garden because it's gonna get messy. And we painted this whole thing by ourselves. We got a blue spray paint because we thought it's pretty cool and it looks pretty nice. And we started painting it. However, it has a few issues. Issue number one is that we're living in such a humid place. So these boards started to kind of bow inwards, you know, it started to curve. And it's not ideal. We had to buy a huge pack of blue tacks to make sure to mount these onto the table and it's not flopping all over the place. So what we did next is find other backdrops that are like vinyl or plasticky type of material that looks really nice on camera and you can't really tell that it's like plastic or vinyl. So I'm going to show you guys those as well. Next are these vinyl backdrops that I mentioned that I found on Amazon. I'm going to link them down below as well. Another place that I really recommend is Club Backdrops. You can find them on Instagram. They make customized backdrops in terms of size, in terms of color, in terms of everything you can think of. They're on the pricier side, but it's worth checking out. Now, these backdrops, as you can see, you can't really even tell that it's not actual marble, especially if you place them down and have the camera pointing at it. Another one that I really liked is this wooden looking thing. So it's like a tabletop, wooden tabletop. Now, the other beauty of these backdrops is it's double-sided. You have one side, which is the marble. Now, the lines and whatnot are not so intense. Another side has marble as well, but a little bit more intense lines in the middle. Now, the other backdrop that I got is quite different. So the other side was a tabletop with lines in the middle. This one is just like a wooden slab. And I guarantee you, I'm gonna put some videos of ours on the screen. You're gonna see, you can't even tell the difference between the fact that it's vinyl and a wooden tabletop. Next up, I'm gonna talk about lighting setup and the importance of using LED video lights. Okay, so I mentioned that I'm using the Godox SL60W, but what's most important is how you position it, how you use it, and how you treat the area that you're using in terms of light. So the first most important thing is to move this into the center of your table, like so. Now, why that is important is because you want to make sure that your surface that you're shooting your recipes on is very well lit evenly. You don't want one side to be super lit and another side to be super dark. Another most important thing is to have your curtains closed if you're shooting somewhere where there's sunlight coming in. Now, why that is important? Sunlight is unpredictable, but the video light is predictable. Sunlight being unpredictable, and you might be shooting at like around 4 p.m. and you're going towards sunset, suddenly half your recipe is well lit, the other half of your recipe is very dark. So make sure to close your curtains and just use your video light. Another more important thing is to close all your ambient lights, those ugly yellow lights that are usually on everyone's roofs, and just stick to one video light or two in my case where I use a fill light. Next, let me show you how to set up camera A or the top-down camera on my boom arm. Now let's get into actually mounting things together and shooting the recipes. Here is the base plate of the Joby ball head, and this goes onto the camera in this orientation. Now that that's done, make sure it's super tight because you don't want this camera to suddenly fall down, all right? Now, let's get this mounted onto the overhead boom arm. But first, we're gonna have to fix this. So as you can see, it's pretty off angled. It needs to be at like a 90-degree angulation. I would say that looks pretty good. You want to kind of overcompensate for it, so you don't want it 100% 90 degrees. Have it a bit like lopsided towards the sandbag, and once you have your camera on there, it's going to balance out each other. It's like an equilibrium. Next, let's talk about positioning of this. You want to have it about middle to the table. So as you can see, the boom arm is almost to the center of the table, but you won't know for sure until you turn on the camera on top of the boom arm to make sure. Now let's mount this on top. Now it's time to mount the camera on there. And it's hooked in. Now let me just adjust a little bit and then let's turn on the camera. All right, now that I've mounted the camera onto this boom arm, it's time to set the settings of my camera to make sure everything looks pretty nice. And I need to obviously make sure that the camera is well oriented, so nothing looks pretty lopsided. Everything needs to look very uniform and very pristine. I'm super exacting, so I need to make sure that every line is straight and everything looks perfect. So now that we're on here, obviously we have a little bit of a blown out scene. So we're gonna bump up the aperture to about 4.5 is what I like to sit at. Then I'd like to go on 1/50 for my shutter speed because that's the best for motion blur. And then another thing that I like to change is to drop down my ISO until it looks about right and nothing looks too overexposed. So I think I'd like to sit around 250. So my shutter speed is sitting at 1/50, my f-stop is sitting at 4.5, and my ISO is sitting at 250. Now it's time to make sure that my zoom is spot on, to make sure that the canvas or the 1920 by 1080 aspect ratio fits right in the middle of my shot. Now, the way I like to verify the angulation and the positioning of the camera is to bring like a bowl and put it into the center of the camera and to verify whether everything is spot on or not. So I'll go grab a bowl and we'll re-verify. Okay, now that I have my bowl, I like to use the largest size to ensure that that gives me the best picture. I'm gonna put it into the very center of the shot. And to be honest, I think that looks pretty good. What I like to see is that the size of the bowl and the actual bowl itself looks quite circular, because if your angle is off, one side is gonna look quite big and the other side is gonna look quite small. There's some sort of distortion that you're gonna see. So over here, I think I'm pretty happy with it, and I think we're ready to shoot our recipe with camera A. But next, we're gonna talk about camera B, which is our side shot. Time to set up the tripod to put my side shot on. So here's my tripod that I like. I got it from Amazon. The brand is called Newer, however they call it. I like to open the legs. Now that the tripod is pretty open and the legs are on the floor, let's mount the camera and then reposition relevant to the bowl. All right, so now from what I'm seeing here is quite a bit of table over there. I can see the whole curtain over there and it doesn't look that good so far. But in order to mitigate that, I'm going to raise the tripod even higher than this and I'm going to point it down until we get the bowl right in the center of our shot and we don't have all that dead space there. What I like to do is, again, I'm not 100% happy with it. So what I like to do is maybe readjust the top shot or do a little bit of repositioning on the bowl to make sure that we get the perfect shot. So I'm gonna be playing around a little bit until I get that shot and we're gonna show you how it looks. Now that we've covered how to set up the cameras, the lights, the boom arm, and everything else in between, let's talk about the actual equipment required to do the recipes. One of the most important things that I've learned throughout this entire process is don't rely on the equipment you already have in the kitchen. You're gonna have to invest a little bit more money in the equipment that is separate from what you use in the kitchen, like mixers, bowls, and so on. So I'm gonna show you all the other additional stuff that we purchased in order to make these recipes happen. So the first most important thing is our hand mixer. This thing is our bread and butter. This hand mixer is something that we've used pretty much in all our videos. I always stay away from those big mixers because I like to see what's in the bowl. And those big mixers are always covering up everything. It's quite hefty, quite heavy. I don't like it. So hand mixer for the win. This is separate from what we have using in our own kitchen for our day-to-day use. Next, our measuring cups. I think we have like 2 sets of these measuring cups. One of these fancy ones for some fancy recipes, and another set which is like super colorful with like red and blue and stuff. So again, 2 sets of measuring cups. Very, very important. You're always gonna run out, especially if you're doing like multiple recipes in one day. Next is the set of bowls that you need. So many times we've found ourselves finishing one recipe and we're already tired, and now we have to wash the bowls all over again. So again, I really highly recommend to have at least 2 or 3 sets of bowls that are exactly the same size. So get like 3 different bowls that look the same, have the same size. With this one is around 18 centimeters. So have 3 of the 18 centimeters, have 3 of the 15, and 3 of the 13 centimeters. Next up is our weighing scale. This one is an electronic weighing scale, quite dirty, but this is also one of the most important tools that we use, because a lot of recipes out there call for specific grams or specific kilograms of material to be used for that ingredient. So again, weighing scale, super important. Next up is our tabletop stove. For me, I like to do all the filming in one spot. So I ended up investing in one of these. These are pretty cheap, like $20 to $50. So you can just pick one up from Amazon again. I think it's really, really nice on camera. It gives a very nice continuity. I highly recommend it. I don't think you should record on your stove that's in the kitchen. You're gonna have to bring all your camera equipment, the whole light setup, and everything in between, and I don't think it's feasible. Just keep everything in one spot. The less friction, the more videos you're gonna make. Next, you have these measuring cups per se that are pretty much for liquid. The other one that I showed you are for your dry ingredient. This one is pretty much used for the liquid one. What we ended up doing is getting one small one and one large one. If you're doing like a cake recipe, it's gonna call for this. We have a bunch of other stuff. We have like pretty much, I think, 3 spatulas. We have a lot of measuring spoons. So we have multiple sets of measuring cups, multiple sets of bowls. We also have multiple sets of measuring spoons. And that's pretty much it, to be honest. I mean, I think anything else, even though I mentioned forget about using your own kitchen equipment, but at the end of the day, you're gonna end up using it and it's completely fine. But the things that you end up having to use multiple times back to back, those are the ones that I recommend buying 2 or 3 sets of. I think that covers it all. If you have any questions or if you have any doubts, make sure to drop them down in the comment section below. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe, like, hit that notification bell for more video tips just like this one, and I'll see you guys in the next one.